So here we are in our last video for our unit on ecology. This is 16.3 and 16.4, Threats to Biodiversity and Conservation. Our key concept is the impact of a growing human population threatens biodiversity, but conservation methods can help protect and restore ecosystems. New vocabulary, we've got habitat fragmentation, introduced species, non-native species, invasive species, Sustainable Development, Endangered Species Act, and Environmental Protection Agency. Essential question, what are the impacts of human populations on biodiversity, and what can be done to help conserve and restore ecosystems? So preserving biodiversity is important to the future of the biosphere. The loss of biodiversity has long-term effects, both loss of medical and technological advances, extinction of species, and the loss of ecosystem stability. So it's huge. We need the biodiversity. There's all sorts of things that are benefits to us to preserve it. Loss of habitat actually eliminates species, so it can cause extinction or even cause a species to become threatened because they have no place to live. So habitat fragmentation prevents an organism from accessing its entire home range. It occurs when a barrier forms within the habitat, like us building a road or building parking lots or building homes in an area. So it's often caused by human development. One solution is building these things called habitat corridors. So like if you look at our roads here, they built this bridge down here in this bottom image. The bridge is actually covered with grasses and stuff like that because it allows that habitat that's been cut in half by this road that's going right through it. It connects both sides. So corridors can be road overpasses or underpasses and allows those species to move between the different areas of the habitat, so it helps them. Introduced species can also disrupt stable relationships in the ecosystem. An introduced species is one that's brought into the ecosystem by humans. We call them non-native species because they're non-native to those areas. Sometimes it's accidental where they've been pets and then accidentally got loose. Sometimes it's on purpose because people have animals that get too big and they eat too much and they decide, hey, I'm just going to let those go. So introduced species can become invasive species, which push out our native species and can have environmental and economic impacts. So invasive species, things like the Burmese python and the Florida Everglades, are starting to push out some of those alligators and fight with them over being top predators in those areas. They can have environmental impacts like pushing out those other animals, and also they can affect different things in that environment. The other picture down here is a type of vine called a kudzu vine, and it actually like grows over and around all the native trees and it actually like chokes them out where they don't live anymore. Sustainable development manages resources for present and future generations. So sustainable development meets needs without hurting future generations. So we can ensure that the resources meet the current needs and those resources will still be available for future use. Now our timber industry, like our wood, has started to adopt sustainable practices where if they do cut down places, they replant so that they have a cycle of replanting and cutting. And then global fisheries also have adopted several sustainable practices like rotation of catches. You can only catch things at certain times, only using certain type of equipment, making sure that you only take in so much of it, so harvest reduction, and then also fishing bans where certain species you cannot catch at all. So conservation practices focus on a few species but benefit those entire ecosystems. The Endangered Species Act works to protect individual species from extinction. And listed species are often called an umbrella species because a lot of things can fall underneath it, where if they go extinct, they're going to affect a lot of other organisms. And it also, like, once they become protected, a lot of things that maybe they live in or what they do, their actual ecosystems are protected. So the habitat in which the species lives must be protected. And if that habitat is like, we know that that's a restricted area where we're not going to do fishing, we're not going to go there and do different things because the certain animal lives there, other species are protected kind of like default because they share that ecosystem. Protecting Earth's resources helps protect our future. And the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, was created in 1970. The EPA develops policies and regulations to protect the environment. And then also new laws or legislation helps to protect the environment and endangered species like the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Endangered Species Act. We also have the National Park Service, which manages public lands. And we have over 390 areas. It covers 84 million acres, which is a lot of land that's put aside as just national parks. There's also several ways that people can help protect the environment, like control our population growth, to develop sustainable technology and practices, protect and maintain our ecosystems, reducing your ecological footprint, all sorts of different things. So we really need to make sure we're mindful of the things that we use and reuse and put out into that environment. All right, that is it for 16.3 and 16.4.